A number of people have asked me to talk about a storm. Storms are different from gales, aren't they? A lot of us have been out in gales, and I've been out in, well, plenty of them really, to be honest, and not wishing to shoot a line. I've probably lost count of the gales I've been out in, but storms, they are something different, and I know I can remember each one, and I can certainly count them on one hand. But there's one particular one that really sticks in my mind, and I'd like to talk to you about that today. It happened in the mid-1970s when Ros and I were homeward bound from North America towards Ireland and ultimately Liverpool. We left Nova Scotia far too late in the year. Late September we left, and the passage took us a lot longer than we expected. The passage is less than 2,500 miles long, and with a 32-foot boat you would reckon on averaging at least 100 miles a day. You can do a lot better than that, of course, if things go your way, but we had no engine in this boat at that time, and so we had to take what came, the rough with the smooth, and there were going to be some headwinds, so we reckoned 100 miles a day. So 3-4 weeks should have done it. It took a lot longer than that, as it turned out, because here's how things fell out. We left Nova Scotia, had a reasonable breeze, we got the usual dose of fog off the Grand Banks, bounced off the fishing boats and the Virgin Rocks, and managed to get ourselves out into deep water. No GPS, of course, in those days, just astronavigation, and if you can't see the sky, you've got to do the best you can. But on we went, and very soon, when we should have been getting westerlies to blow us home to Ireland, in fact we got easterlies. We got 2 weeks of easterlies, wham bang, right on the nose. What a cruel thing to happen. And it didn't just breeze a little bit and allow us to tack into it, it blew old boots. Not gale force, but not far off it, and we just in the end got fed up. We were being beaten up, the boat was taking shocking punishment, and we hove to, and we sat it out. Went nowhere for several days, but we were comfortable, the boat was safe, we were eating okay, and things weren't so bad. We just waited for a westerly, and finally it came. And when it came sweetly at first, but shortly the barometer started dropping. By now we're probably just over halfway across the North Atlantic. The barometer's dropping fast, very fast actually. The seas are building up astern, and after a while we're running as fast as we can with any sail on, and we decided that it was getting too hairy, and reluctantly we stopped and hove to again. We could have run on under bare poles, but we decided we'd heave to. Well, that didn't last long because the wind was building very fast, and we had canvas sails on that boat, and they were in grave danger of clean blowing out of the bolt ropes. So we took them down, bore away, and ran under bare poles. And we ran under bare poles all that night and most of the next day. And the self-steering was coping to start with. We had a wind vane self-steering that picked up the breeze, transferred it to a paddle in the water, which magnified the force and fed it through ropes to the tiller steering, which steered us very well. And that went fine until the sea started to really build up. And suddenly I realised that the boat kept broaching. We were just not managing at all. We were going far too fast, so we could have streamed warps. But basically, the self-steering couldn't manage anymore, and so we were going to have to steer whatever we did. Well, we tried that for a short while, and we realised very soon it was seriously bad out there. You couldn't stand on deck, there was so much wind. If you tried to stand up, you were likely to be blown over, so it was probably blowing way over 50 knots. The seas were house high, taller than the mast, and some of them were breaking, and it was looking pretty grisly. When you didn't get an awkward sea, when you looked along them, they were quite magnificent really. These great phalanxes of sea just marching from America. Great big greybeards coming along. And the boat came up to the top. When you got to the top, it blew your hat off, and down in the bottom there was definitely a place where the wind went fluky because it was being disturbed by the sea. So the self-steering couldn't cope, and neither could we. We were knackered. So we did the only thing we could. We lay a hull. Now, in those days, with heavy displacement boats, lying a hull was considered an option. So you don't want to do it now with a light displacement boat with a fin keel. No, thank you, sir. But with one of these boats, it was probably okay. The boat, you see, was a pilot cutter, designed and built by Colin Archer himself in 1903. And Colin Archer was the man who built the greatest pilot boats probably in the whole of Scandinavia at that time. He was famous for it, and his boats were supremely seaworthy and surprisingly fast. So this is a very beautiful boat, 32 feet long, 12 feet beam, would you believe, and 5 foot 6 inches draft. Heavy, heavy displacement, probably 11, 12 tons. Big gaff rigging. So we're lying a hull, and I lashed the helm to leeward, which seemed like a good idea. Lashed the tiller to leeward, so the boat was trying to steer upwind. So if she did gather anyway, she'd put her shoulder into the seas rather than taking them beam on, because beam on is what you don't want to know. You take a beam sea, it'll knock you flat, and maybe worse. Well, we survived for quite a while like that. We strapped ourselves into our bunks down below, battened down the hatches, and every now and again we took a really bad knock. The boat was picked up and thrown sideways. You could feel her being thrown by the seas. There's a terrific roar and racket coming on from on deck. And when we took one of these bad knocks, everything went to pear-shape down below. All the books came flying out of the bookshelves. The pans jumped off the stove. Anything that was loose went flying. Pair of dividers ended up stuck in the bulkhead over my head. It was not good, really. And but when this had happened, we'd get up, sort it out, re-establish order, pump the ship out, get back in our bunks, and then probably a couple of hours later it happened again. You always knew when it was coming, because you'd hear this express train noise, which happens when the big breaking sea is coming. And so there we were. And the second night is when it happened. That's when things really went to the bad. We got a bad knock. There was a terrific bang from down aft. Everything went mad in the cabin, and suddenly I could hear the rudder flapping about on the back of the boat. I thought, my goodness me, you know, we can't lose the rudder. Whatever we do, we mustn't lose the rudder. And I could hear it banging against its stop. So I went out on deck, hanging on as best I could. Ros peered out from the companionway. I got a torch because it's pitch dark, shone a light, and lo and behold, the tiller had broken. Snapped clean off at the rudder head. It went into a square hole on the rudder head, a square section on the tiller. I'll show you in a minute because I got the tiller. And, well, we had to put it back in there, and quick. And the first thing to do was chisel out the old tiller from the hole. Well, I got my chisel and my mallet, and I got up on the stern. Ros went with me, and she hung on. I tied myself on as best I could, and she hung onto my feet to stop me from going over the side, because even with a safety line on, going over the side wouldn't have been funny in that. I doubt I'd have got back. So she hung on, and I chiselled away. Meanwhile, the rudder's going mad like this, so it's like trying to hit a moving target, and she's holding the torch, which is running out of batteries. The waves are breaking clean over us, the wind's howling, and in the end we managed to get a clear hole so we could get the tiller back in. I shoved it in, and guess what? It was tapered, of course, and it was too small. It was flapping about in the holes. It wasn't going to last 5 minutes, so I tried wedging it in. Banged in some wedges, which I always carry wedges. They didn't stay. I tried putting a flat windlass handle in, a steel shaft, but that didn't fit either. There was nothing I could do. And then I came up with the right answer. Now, I'm going to show you the tiller. Here it is. If you've been looking at my videos for a long time, you'll have seen this tiller before, because I've told the story about the tiller, but not the whole story about the gale. Here's where it snapped off. If you look at it, you can see that it's just completely broken off like a rotten carrot. And it's not rotten, it's in really good condition. But I'm here to tell you that ash does that sometimes. I'm not sure that I'd choose ash again for a tiller. It's a popular wood, but well, there you go. So at one end we got some lovely work, you see, proper job. That's where the tiller lines went on. And at this end we got two nasty black holes. And what are they? Well, they are where I solved the problem of what to do with the tiller. And this is what we did. I don't believe in going to sea without a load of spares. You've got to have something on board for whatever the eventuality is. And on this case, I found some 6-inch nails. Look at that. A big galvanised old-fashioned nail. And here's what you do. You get your linseed oil pot. You dip it in linseed oil, because that will help it on its way. It's a bit of a jagged thing, a galvanised nail, and when it gets in there, it won't drive in very easy, but soak it in linseed and it'll go. Offer it up and whack, in it goes. And when it gone through, the ones I had were actually probably slightly longer than these, and they stuck out the other end, and I was able to bang the ends over, like an old-fashioned job, like you might do in your shed. Bang the ends of the nails over. That secured it all, and it didn't go anywhere. I got 4 nails into it, and it held. And it got us back to Ireland. But the worst wasn't over then, because the next day the wind veered. It went round to the northwest, which is what happens with a classic gale. Swings round to the northwest, and of course it takes the sea with it. It's dropping down now. It's probably down to 35, 40 knots, just normal gale force. And as the seas come across each other, they're piling up. And every now and again, you get a pyramid-shaped one, which is probably the basics of a rogue wave. I don't know if you'd call it a rogue wave, but it wasn't very nice. And I went out in the cockpit thinking maybe I could get her underway and steady her down a bit. And I set the staysail with 2 reefs in it somehow, got it sheeted in, and she was sailing away, and I heard a wave coming. A real whopper, and I looked over my shoulder, and there it was, a great big pyramid of water with my name all over it. So I knew it was going to douse the boat, so I jumped up on the boom gallows. It came over the boat like a roaring torrent, and the boat disappeared completely. The only thing sticking out was my head and the mast. The boat was completely gone, and seconds later, it was probably no time at all, but it felt like a minute, she came up like a whale coming out of the sea, and the water poured off her. And she was all right. Even the dinghy was still there. It was unbelievable, but something bad had happened, because I could hear from down below. Ros was squeaking away. She opened the hatch, came up with a face like thunder, and she said, "I can see the sky through the deck." And I looked down to starboard, and the dodger that I'd had to protect the cockpit from flying spray, well, that was a bit of a joke, wasn't it, had carried away. It had taken the stanchions with it, and the stanchions were bolted through the deck. They'd taken the deck planks, they'd ripped the fastenings out, and 2 of the deck planks had gone. Now we had a big problem and a big hole in the deck. Well, it's back to the old scrapyard again. My boat was always full of old stuff, and we had loads of plywood on board. I always pick up a sheet of plywood here and there. You can always put it on the bunk cushion, you know, and you never know when you'll need it. So out came the old plywood, out with the jacksaw, knock it into shape. Didn't have to be accurate, just some sort of thing that would fill in the hole. Bit of tarry rag underneath it, whack it down, few nails, and bang them down. And that did it, you know. That actually kept the water out. It didn't keep everything dry down below, obviously water filtered in, but it kept the body of the water out so that the boat was staunch and she was safe. And after that, the breeze carried on easing away. It stayed in the northwest for quite a long time. And actually, as the sea went down and we got the mainsail up, we really had quite a decent sail at last, and we well deserved it. Until finally, Ireland hove up over the horizon, and were we glad to see it.
You're confused, you're sort of being bashed around, you heave to, you get a cup of tea, you're halfway across the Atlantic. It's a while ago. How are you navigating? Did you have GPS or anything?
No, nothing like that. We were navigating by the stars and the sun only, with a sextant. This isn't, we're talking 1975 here, or 76.
But how do you, I mean, can you actually see the stars and the sun, you know, enough in the storm condition to be able to navigate?
No, not at all. But you don't know where you are, but it doesn't matter, does it? Because you know you're in the middle of the Atlantic. There's nothing to hit. And you know that when the storm blows away, you will see the sun. It will come back, as indeed it will now. You will see the sun again. And when you do, you zap it down onto the horizon. It can be a bit dodgy if there's a huge sea running, but when you've done it a few times, you know, you get around that.
Okay, you have to have a bit of patience and
yeah,
it will pass.
James, it really doesn't matter that you don't know where you are to the nearest yard. People now feel, because they have sat navs in their cars, they need to know exactly where they are all the time, or they don't feel secure. In those days, so long as we knew there was nothing to hit and that we were basically in the right sort of place, we didn't care. Didn't matter at all. So if your astronavigation wasn't super accurate, who cares? It'll get you to within sight of a lighthouse when you hit the shore, and that's all you need.
Well, I guess technically you're not lost. You're on the planet. You're safe. You're in a seaworthy boat, and I guess on that front, I think we're in a seaworthy boat with Workfront. We are in a bit of a storm where everyone seems to be working in back-to-back meetings, and maybe it's time for us to heave to and stop and have a cup of tea and figure out what we do next. But
Maybe
Tom,
it is.
Thank you so much. I'll hand back to Paul. Appreciate it.
Nice to talk, James.
Actually, I do have a couple of questions that I was going to ask anyway. And sort of James touched on it, that sort of that fearfulness and not knowing where you are. And you touched on how people needing to know where they are with their sat navs. Do you feel real fear when you're in a storm like that, or what's the overriding emotion? I think so. How did you get through it? You know, what's the?
That's a very good question, Paul. I'm often asked that, and I find it a difficult question to answer because, in a sense, for me, there are two sorts of fear. I've knocked around a bit, and I've found that if I'm in control of a situation and I appreciate what's going on, and I know I've done all I can, I may feel anxious, but not actual what you might call visceral fear, as you do if, well, not to put too fine a point on it, on one occasion in my life, I found myself in a place I shouldn't have been, and there was a suggestion somebody was going to stick a knife in me. Now, that was not a good feeling. That was fear, visceral fear. I didn't feel that in this storm, and I never have done at sea. I feel anxious. I hope that rope doesn't break. I hope this sail doesn't blow out, but not actual gut fear, no.
So is that because the anxiety is covered by, you feel you've got control and you've covered everything you can need to do at this time, and I know where I'm going?
Exactly, exactly. I've confidence in my boat because I've prepared her myself. I haven't paid somebody else to do it. I've done it myself. And if there was something I really couldn't do, it was beyond my skill level, I've hired somebody who I really trusted and I've watched him do it. So that I have complete confidence in my boat. My boat is as good as she can be. And if I've got confidence in my boat, and I know that from my experience of seamanship, I'm probably doing the best thing I can with her to give her her best chance of looking after me, then I'm content.
Actually, just on that point of being confident in your boat, she was so old. Even in the 70s.
Yeah, she was. She was 70 years old and more. And that's another good question because, yeah, I'm glad you asked me that because I sail all sorts of boats for my living. And I've got to say that the traditional working boats that were out there putting pilots on board, that were out there fishing on the Dogger Bank in all sorts of weather, the boats that were designed by simple men actually have an understanding. Those men had an understanding of natural things that are often denied to the sophisticated understanding that we have now. They developed their boats. They were designed by their fathers, by their grandfathers and their great-grandfathers. They developed slowly, and anything that worked was kept. And they knew it worked because they weren't playing about, you know, on a summer's afternoon. They were out there in winter, seeing the wonders of the Lord. They knew what was real and what was not. If it worked, they stuck with it and it was built into the next boat. If it didn't work, you never saw it again. And so the boats developed slowly. And these pilot cutters were amongst the seaworthy boats ever built. They were vernacular, really, although the Colin Archer boats were designed, but they were designed as a result of long experience. The modern yacht very often is designed on a table, and it's designed with perhaps slightly different criteria in mind because the boat's got to sail really well. It's got to go across the channel quickly on a summer's afternoon to get people to France to have a nice holiday, and quite right too. Why wouldn't you? They're doing the right thing. They're producing great boats. If I have to be in a full storm in the North Atlantic with just one other person and I'm completely knackered and I have to rely on the boat to look after me, I know what I would rather be in, even if they are old. If they were new, I would feel really confident.
Actually, I'm going to ask the final question and open it up to everybody else, but certainly touched on that. If you're going to be in a boat with just one other person, and you know, with a lot of us at the moment are experiencing of this lockdown and being alone with one or two people, you know, do you feel lonely out there, or was there? How do you get over that? You know, how do you cope with not being lonely, or what's the tactics, I guess?
Well, today, nearly everybody who's sailing the oceans has all sorts of radio equipment, and they have happy hours and they talk to each other every evening. They have sat phones. They can ring home to tell mum and dad and everybody in Brighton how they're getting on. We had none of that. We were alone. We were alone under God on the sea, and you know, we liked it. We loved it because when you let go your dock lines, your creditors can't catch you anymore. Nobody knows where you are. When we set sail for Brazil, in 1973. I can't remember what year it was, but whenever it was, I sent my father a postcard, which would of course arrive the next morning in those days, with no ifs and no buts, and it cost about five pence, old pence, but we won't go there and talk about that. That's how it worked. I sent him a postcard, said, "We're off, Dad. I'll contact you from Brazil." He did not hear from us for 3 months. We were gone.
Okay.
Because he couldn't, because we were at sea. There was no way of communicating. And we like that. We're content with each other's company. We're still married. We're happy together. We're shut down in our house, locked down at the moment. We're over 70 and we've been locked down for a month. And we're entirely content. We talk, we read, we do what we did at sea. We write.
Excellent. Inspiring. Anybody, sorry, I'll open up to everybody else, anybody else on the call. Any questions for Tom? I'm certainly just awe-inspired by this. This is amazing. I live by the seas, but I'm a kayaker, not a yachter. So there we go. So, but I do spend my time on the water. Any questions from anybody?
You're a lot fitter than me, Paul.
Well,
Tom,
Yes.
how long was the trip? How many days?
The trip, we were trying to work it out actually before we did this, and I think the trip was probably 32 days to do 2,400 miles. Ridiculous. We should have done it much quicker than that, but we had such a bad time. Yeah, about 32 days. Yeah. Yes, see somebody else.
And what kind of food did you took with you?
No refrigeration. So we used to stock up on you got really good tinned food in those days. We used to have lots of tinned food. We had a salt cod, a Nova Scotia salt cod, dried codfish, which you get a lot of meat off that. We had a barrel of herring, which were not too nice actually, but you know, they were there. So we had all sorts of things, and dried food, potatoes will last for ages. A cabbage will see you across the Atlantic, and onions, if you look after them, keep them aerated, they'll go a month easy. Eggs will last. Not a problem, really, actually. We didn't have much water. We carried 38 gallons of water, total. And at one time, we were 42 days at sea, and we arrived with 17 gallons.
Oh, shit.
Just shows how we squander our water, doesn't it, in our daily life?
Petra, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was actually on my way to ask a question for the water, because I'm sailing as well. So we have a 28-foot Ofni Sonat from 1980,
Lovely.
so also an old aluminium boat. I have never ever in my life been to storms like you have. I had some experiences which, as you said, I will be happy not to make them again. But my question was, how did you do with water? Because those old boats, they are not really, you know, configured to have huge tanks for drinking water.
No, they're not. You're quite right. And we had an official water tank, which carried, I think, 20 gallons. We had another one, a fiberglass tank that we'd built into the forecastle. And in there we could carry another about 12 or 13. That gave us, what do we look at? I don't know, 35 gallons. And then the rest we carried in gallon cans. Yeah, and every day, we filled a half-gallon can. And that was our drinking water for the day. And we managed, that was 4 pints, and that was plenty. We managed fine with that. Even in the tropics.
Okay.
We washed up with seawater and T-pole, very strong detergent, and we cooked with seawater and a little bit of fresh.
Yeah.
And we washed in seawater, and about once a week or a couple of times a week, we'd have a treat and have a gallon of water to rinse ourselves off and do our hair with.
Okay, thank you.
We kept clean and sweet. It was okay.
Yeah, thank you. Wonderful.
Okay.
Any other questions? Anybody else have a question?
Yeah, hi, Tom. Very good speech. Thank you very much. A keen sailor myself. Did you have just one set of sails on board?
Yes, we did. Nice to see the youngsters there. Hi, girls. Yes, we had just one suit of sails. We had a flax canvas mainsail, 450 square feet, a very heavy sail. The head sails were actually terraline, and we had a choice of 3 jibs and 1 staysail, which had 2 sets of reefs in it, and we had a gaff topsail, which set on a yard. We also had a reaching staysail, which was a big triangular sail, and a very light ghosting sail, so that when we were in the trade winds going downwind, we could have the ghosting sail out one side and the reaching staysail out the other, and keep the main stowed away. And that all worked very well, but we had no spare mainsail and no spare working sails, but they were in good condition and they lasted well.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Anybody else have a question for Tom?
I have one quickly, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
Tom, I was interested in hearing your story. I was also interested to know how exactly you may have got the sailing bug in the first place and how you got into the sport, if you will, or pastime.
Yeah. Well, my father rowed at Cambridge and never sailed. He came from a fairly modest home in North Lancashire, and he had always dreamed about going to sea and never was able to because he was born before the First World War. You went through the 2 wars. He was in the Second War. He couldn't do it. So he encouraged me to read about going to sea. And I did. And when I was 14, he sent me off to the Norfolk Broads, and he hired a little 25-foot gaff sloop. And me and my friend from round the corner were put on this boat and told to go sailing. We had a book that said, this is how you sail. And that was it. We'd never been on a sailing boat. And we learnt pretty damn quick. And the first day out on that boat, I was absolutely sold on it. I'd read these books. I'd read Joshua Slocum and 1 or 2 other people when I was 14. And I thought, well, this is it. This is what I want to do with my life. And really, I never looked back. The rest is rather a long story, but that's how it happened.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, if anybody has an opportunity to go and look on the website, Tom dropped out of law school to go and go to sailing. So it's absolutely wonderful. Right. Any other questions from anybody?
I have a suggestion. If you ever are tired of sailing, I welcome you to Armenia. We do not have any sea or ocean or whatever, but we have really nice mountains for you to hike a bit.
I like the sound of that. That sounds wonderful. And Ros, my wife, will love that. She just can't walk enough. She loves to walk. And I managed to limp along okay. It's a grand thing to be in the mountains. Thank you. Good idea.
Wonderful. Tom, I can't thank you enough. That was absolutely brilliant. Truly awe-inspiring. These calls are supposed to be awesome, but this was awe-inspiring, certainly. I think it has been thoroughly entertaining, and we hopefully have been inspired and can learn a huge amount. James, anything to say? Anything to add?
I think you said it nicely there, Paul. Tom, brilliant. You've lifted the spirits on our boat, and we will continue to sail through this storm. And I think along with lots of other companies, when the storm is over, we should remember the designers of those pilot cutters and figure out what we would do differently to prepare for the next storm. So thank you so much for your inspirational words, and we'll make the donation to the RNLI very shortly. Thank you.
Glad to hear it, James. Thank you for the opportunity. Cheers, everybody.
Great.